Welcome back to another episode of Sweatin' Bullets, a Bulletproof fantasy football podcast. I am your host, DF Beancounter. You can follow me on Twitter at DF Beancounter. With me, as always, is Jacob Sanderson. You can follow him literally at Jacob Sanderson. You will have no issues finding him whatsoever. You can search his name, you can search his handle. It's the same thing. So it's really easy to find Jacob, virtually all platforms. How you doing?
Pretty easy to find. I'm doing good, man. Been a while here for the Sweatin' Bullets fantasy football podcast. I feel like we're kind of in the dog days of Dynasty. Like this is kind of when everybody kind of takes a break in Dynasty a little bit because you're grinding all the way through the season. Then you like take a breath for 1 second. Then you're grinding all the pre-draft process. Then it's the actual NFL draft. Everybody's doing the rookie drafts. Finally now people are like, free agency. Now it's like, okay, people are kind of chilling out a little bit. OTA is just starting.
Now we're grinding the supplemental draft.
The supplemental draft, yes. I'm in a couple supplemental Devy drafts right now. Oh, you mean the supplemental, like actual NFL, the supplemental NFL draft?
Isn't it called the supplemental? Like Terrell Pryor got drafted?
Yeah, and we both just
Josh Gordon, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, Josh Gordon too. Yeah,
like there's some studs.
Ryan Bosworth.
Like anybody who's gonna have like 1,000 yards for the Cleveland Browns is coming out of the supplemental draft.
And who wears 12?
Where's 12? These are the facts.
Yeah, so if you want to draft someone in the supplemental draft, you have to send them to the Browns. They have to wear 12, otherwise they're not going to have success. But I have been doing supplemental Devy drafts, and my God, is there anything more depressing than like the 5th round of a supplemental Devy draft? And you're like, I really want to do anything else right now, but instead I'm on 247sports.com, like Command F the like 2026 tight end recruits.
It's glorious. I mean,
that's when you're
playing Devy until you're doing that.
That's when you start to wonder, like, will I ever have sex?
That would be top of mind, I would imagine.
Yeah, like there's Viagra, and then like whatever the opposite of Viagra is like, like I'm not sure which 4-star freshman tight end I think has a better chance to be a move tight end in the NFL. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to justify. But during the dog days of Dynasty that we are in, what tends to happen a lot is that I just call them days, like blank days, where all of a sudden some person fires off some tweet, some other person gets angry about that tweet, and then all of a sudden it becomes a day, right? For anybody who has had the displeasure of being on Dynasty Twitter recently, they know that it was Travis Etienne / Tank Bigsby day recently. We had a little bit of a Chiga Okonkwo day situation. We've had, several days pop up. If you were on Dynasty Twitter last year, it was usually just Gabriel Davis day every day. It was every day was Gabriel Davis day. There's rarely a reprieve. So Drew has been hibernating through this, made a good choice. He has not been on Twitter. He's been so off Twitter that before we recorded this show, I actually informed him that DeAndre Hopkins was released. He wasn't aware that DeAndre Hopkins was a free agent.
It was glorious. I don't think I've ever been more excited in my life. That was it was like how do you describe it? It was like delayed reaction, I guess. Because like, how long did this happen?
Right, because I was like, okay, one of the topics for today will be DeAndre Hopkins landing spots. And you're like, landing spots? What do you mean?
Is he getting traded?
Yeah. Anyhow, so this is the theme of this episode is here's what Drew missed on Twitter. So we're going to talk about some of the top hot topics and circulating the rounds. I'm sure that we're going to go on tangents like we always do. But we'll start with that. We'll start with DeAndre Hopkins, currently a free agent, no longer an Arizona Cardinal. And this has kind of started off a whole big branch of stuff because first, what do we do with DeAndre Hopkins? Is this good? Is this bad? Where would he go? If he goes somewhere, how does that hurt a lot of the logical type of players that we were potentially anticipating breakouts for on those teams? And then what's left with the Cardinals? First off, a lot of targets left for a lot of wide receivers that can't ride roller coasters. And then also, like, what does this mean about Kyler Murray? Like, are they fully tanking? Is Kyler actually going to play this year? So let's talk through all these ramifications of the Cardinals. First off, DeAndre Hopkins, one of the greatest wide receivers of our little mini generation here. Currently going off the board at the 8-12, 96th overall, wide receiver 38 overall in Dynasty. What are your thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins and just how high do you think the ceiling could be if he gets the right landing spot?
I think he could be the wide receiver 1. Like, I think he's certainly in his range of outcomes. He literally had a 29.4% target share last year, which is number 4 in the world. Like, that's not like 4 years ago this happened. Like, literally the last time we saw him playing football, which was the last time anybody played football, he had a 29.4% target share. He is still a bona fide alpha. He could walk onto virtually any team and simply eat all of the targets. And that's pretty exciting. So I've been buying DeAndre Hopkins. I will continue to be buying DeAndre Hopkins. And wherever he lands, I will be very concerned about whomever is, the collateral damage in that situation. It's going to suck.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy that DeAndre Hopkins, like we just said, it goes at the very end of the 8th round, right? Here's some of the players that go around where Mr. Hopkins is drafted, right? We're talking about Zach Charbonnet's, Devin Etienne's, Will Levis's, right? So we're basically we're talking about guys that go at the 1-2 turn in your rookie drafts. That's where DeAndre Hopkins is going. If you scroll up, wide receivers that are within a year of DeAndre Hopkins in age and posted pretty similar target shares last year. Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, both going in round 4 of startups, right? You're looking at the opportunity cost of them is effectively a Drake London, a Josh Jacobs, a TJ Hawkinson, a Ramondre Stevenson, Christian Watson, whoever you like, right? These are guys that are going ahead of mid-first round rookie picks, going right alongside Jack Smith and Jigba, ahead of Addison and Johnston. And I wouldn't even necessarily say that Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams are overrated. I don't even think that they are, actually. But I think that DeAndre Hopkins has been a pretty massive buy this offseason. It is notable, at least to me, that he was released, right? Like, to me, that signals at least somewhat that NFL decision makers are seeing something, that he might not be the most explosive or impactful wide receiver anymore, that nobody wanted to even do the 5th round trade to get him on his contract that they did for Amari Cooper last year. But at the same time, like, DeAndre Hopkins was on a Cardinals team that ran almost entirely 11 personnel, that always had running backs out in a route, and he was still dominating targets last year. And I think if it wasn't for the Kyler Murray injuries towards the end of last year, and he didn't become so brutally inefficient with sub-replacement level quarterbacks to kind of finish off his year, I think we'd probably be even more excited about DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like, I think that kind of sours the taste in our mouth. I'll tell you where DeAndre Hopkins is probably not going. It's probably not going to a terrible team, right? Like, what teams are going to be looking to sign a 31-year-old wide receiver? Probably good teams. Probably good teams that need wide receivers. And there's a lot of good teams that need wide receivers, most notably the Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs.
Wait. Why do the Bills need a wide receiver?
They need someone to play in the slot, probably someone to compete with Khalil Shakir for reps.
That makes sense.
Yeah. You look at teams, right? It's pretty notable. Bills currently rolling out Gabriel Davis as their ex-wide receiver. The Chiefs are probably rolling out either Marquez Valdes-Scantling or Rashee Rice as their ex-wide receiver. The Browns are currently rolling out Donovan Peoples-Jones as their ex-wide receiver. All those teams obviously have a pretty substantial opportunity for upgrade at their ex-wide receiver position. All have top quarterbacks, all have potential Super Bowl aspirations this year, all have rumored connections to DeAndre Hopkins. What would be your favorite DeAndre Hopkins landing spot?
I think
say for Hopkins, right? Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that would be the best? It's like one of the only teams in the NFL he wouldn't be the best wide receiver on.
Yeah, but it would crush Gabriel Davis, and that would make me smile.
Is that just your favorite for the memes? Like, that's not your favorite for Hopkins. You're just like,
yeah, no, that's my favorite for memes. Like, I just want to watch the world burn, and there's nothing more glorious than Gabriel Davis getting punted 2 years in a row, once by himself and the other time by someone just considerably better than him. So,
the best spot for him from like his own standpoint is probably just the Chiefs, right? Like, it's probably that boring.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the Chiefs. Like, the best spot for any wide receiver in football is the Chiefs.
Yeah.
there's no better landing spots than playing with Patrick Mahomes. I think it makes a lot of sense that he go to the Browns though. Like they have Deshaun Watson. I presume him and Hopkins are friends, and Amari Cooper is a fake alpha, so I think they're probably aware of that now. And Donovan Peoples-Jones is obviously a joke, so we can give up that dream. And then, like, unfortunately, that would nuke my dude Elijah Moore, and I would be sad.
Was that pun intended?
What's that?
You said he would nuke Elijah Moore.
Oh yeah, no, that was not intended. It was just a happy.
You're just that good.
I'm just feeling it, man. I'm back.
Wow, back at the saddle.
And
you said that there was no like twinkle in your eye, so I was like, were you just being that subtle about your joke, or did you not even know it was a joke?
Yeah, so like I think the Browns makes a lot of sense, and but like the Chiefs is easily the best spot. Plus, like Travis Kelce could like fantasy football wise die at any moment. He may not be alive on Sunday, so like
I mean, to be fair, so could DeAndre Hopkins.
That's true. But Amari Cooper is probably not going to not be around on Sunday. He's probably still got another few Sundays left.
Here's my only take with the Browns situation is like with Hopkins, I do think a part of it is the chemistry factor. Like I'm willing to buy in. Like Hopkins is still awesome. I am willing to buy in a little bit though that he's become more limited. Like you look at some of the reception perception charts, you look at how NFL teams have voted with their feet, if you say, by not trading for him, some of the quotes that have been leaked out about him, and just like general intuition about DeAndre Hopkins being a not very fast, now fairly old wide receiver. Like, I don't know that he's necessarily going to be a guy who's going to be a dynamic, explosive player. I don't know that he's ever even really been a particularly explosive player, probably less so now that he's going to be 31 and has had some severe knee injuries. I think with
Patriots not calling for him.
Yeah, there is some rumored interest with the Patriots. I mean, to me, the stumbling block I can't get over with the Patriots is like he's going to play for Bill O'Brien. Really?
Oh yeah, I never even put that together. I was just thinking like they always sign the old aging veteran wide receiver about to die.
Yeah, like they have been rumored. I just like, I mean, Hopkins was so notably
anti-Bill
O'Brien that I just can't see like him being like, I want to play for Bill O'Brien, the offensive coordinator. Like that just would surprise me. But maybe Belichick just goes to him and is like, look, I promise you, you're never gonna have to talk to Bill. You're only gonna talk to me.
Yeah, potentially. The other thing that's interesting to note is that he was not on Aaron Rodgers' wish list.
Yeah, that's true.
So Jets are probably ruled out.
Yeah, I would actually like him to go to the Jets because it would be really cool if Garrett Wilson could be like acquirable.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
That'd be sick. No, but my point with him is I think so much of his game is like predicated on trust in the sense that like he's would it be hyperbolic to say he might be the best contested catch wide receiver ever? Like he would be in the top 5, right? Like he's one of those guys, like that's just so much of his master skills. Like you just throw it up and he's going to have the subtle adjustments to be able to get in the right spot. Like to me, I could see a scenario where even if he's a little bit cooked, which is possible, right? We've talked about the Adam Harstad like marble theory, where basically wide receivers are like, great. They're still the exact same level for fantasy at least. And then they just die. And Hopkins is in the age where he could die at any moment. But if he doesn't die, he's probably going to be the same. It's not really a gradual decline. I see with Watson, it's like, even if he's like a little bit cooked, like Watson then will just have so much trust in him that he's just going to throw it up to him and just trust it. And to me, that's like important. I think his floor really gets secure with the Browns. I like the Browns spot. And yeah, Amari Cooper, like he had a renaissance year last year. It was, I think, his highest target share of his life. I think it was his highest targets per route run of his life too.
Yeah.
The Browns, like Browns were a really favorable environment for wide receivers to put up target earning last year. They ran a ton of 12 personnel and Harrison Bryant. That means Harrison Bryant is on the field, right? And he's either running a route and not being targeted or he's just pass blocking. And so that's just a huge advantage to any other wide receiver or tight end who's in a route where you have Nick Chubb, who just doesn't get targeted really ever. And you have Harrison Bryant, who's pass blocking or never being targeted.
Not getting targeted ever.
Right. So almost every route is like going to one of 3 players, right? And it was usually Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, or Njoku. And I just think that boosts all of their target earning numbers beyond what they actually are as a target earner. You look at them this year, Elijah Moore is now, on the team. They draft Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round. They still have David Bell kicking around. I think this is a team that's going to want to play in 11 a lot more frequently. We had quotes about them wanting to play in 11 and even experimenting with 10 personnel. They would even further that inclination if they go out and sign DeAndre Hopkins. Amari Cooper is 2 years removed from having a sub 20% target share. I don't think that he got better at football in the last 2 years. So I think that it's pretty easy to envision Hopkins walking into Cleveland, taking over 25% of the targets, and Cooper doing about what Cooper did 2 years ago, being an 18, 19% type target share guy, David Njoku being a 15% type target share guy, Elijah Moore playing in 3 wide receiver sets only, Don Peoples-Jones playing literally never.
Seems like best case scenario for everyone involved.
I mean, yeah, tough break for Elijah Moore. We'll say, I mean, Deshaun Watson would be one of the more odious people alive, but quite the pick at ADP in that scenario.
Yeah. It's I'm just going through the depth charts here, and I'm like, there's not really anywhere else that I'm like, oh yeah, they got a good team and need a wide receiver. It's kind of just those guys.
Right. I mean, people have brought up the Ravens, but like, I think that the Ravens actually are kind of set at wide receiver now, right? I mean, Bateman's good still. They just drafted Zay Flowers in the first. I don't know if OBJ is any good, but they gave him $20 million. So presumably they think that he's good, right? They at least have high hopes for it. And they're probably going to want to play a little in 12, right? Like Isaiah Likely's pretty good. So anyway, I think that's it for Hopkins. We're probably buying Hopkins, at least to some extent. I'm curious to see what his ADP does if he does go to somewhere like the Bills or the Chiefs.
I wouldn't even care. Like, I feel like he's so far undervalued that it wouldn't even matter to me. Like, he's never going to get to where he should be at ADP, and therefore I'm just going to continue buying no matter where it gets to.
Yeah, fair enough. That's definitely fair enough. What do you make of the remaining Cardinals wide receivers? So we have Marquise Brown, certainly is definitely raising in value, which is kind of silly because the Hopkins was always going to be leaving the Cardinals. So I don't really know why we're reacting to this now, but Marquise Brown, wide receiver 34, 801. Rondale Moore is quite a scroll down the board. Wide receiver 64, 1407, and obviously Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch are basically free.
I think Rondale Moore becomes like an absolute smash. Like you pretty much have to roster Rondale at this point. I don't necessarily think he's like in a win your league per se, but I think he's going to gain a ton of value this year, and you might as well just have it on your roster and then get it off your roster at the end of the year. And or maybe Rondale is special and we finally see it. But like if you look at his stats, like it's wild. He had like 8 targets a game or more in like pretty near all of his games last year, which I don't know. Like, we don't know what the offense will be, but like the really cool coach was doing like the explosion thing. That was at Rondale, wasn't it? Like explosion. Is that
yeah, explosion. Zoo, 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 zoo.
Yeah, zoo, zoo. Whatever he was doing. It was really cool. I know that much. And it was, I'm pretty sure, directed at Rondale Moore. And ergo, I believe that he thinks that Rondale Moore is explosive, and that's probably
a pretty reasonable inclusion. It's a pretty reasonable conclusion. Yeah,
like I am grasping at straws to put that together, but I think I might be onto something. So, and like if you look at it, like his target share was like 19.4% or somewhere thereabouts in like 9 games, which is great.
Yeah,
or 8 games. Sorry, 8 games. He played 8 games, but one of those games he played like one route and then got hurt. So when you have a really small sample and you have a really outlier sample within that really small sample, it really skews the data. I haven't checked, but I would imagine that his target share in the games in which he played greater than 1% of the routes is like
probably higher.
Really, really quite impressive.
Yeah.
I bet.
And his ADP was still absurd, but it was like a little bit less of a meme this year. Like I wouldn't say that he became a real wide receiver, but I would say that he's, at least if he was a running back, he would have really impressive usage for a running back.
He would be the best running back usage in football if he was a running back. Like
his ADOT this year is 5.3, which is like obviously ridiculous for a wide receiver. But the previous year he was down at 3.3. He had a 6% air yard share. He had a 16% air yard share this year. So he went from being like basically just a gadget player to a somewhat plausibly normal slot wide receiver, which brings about my question on the Rondale thing. If the Cardinals get Zach Ertz back healthy at this point and they get Trey McBride developing this year, we can talk about McBride too if you want to. Pretty decent chance that they might run at least a little bit more 12 personnel, especially Dave Petzing, who's their offensive coordinator, comes from Cleveland, the team that we just talked about running 12 personnel all the time. If they want to run in 12 personnel, who the fuck plays X wide receiver for the Cardinals? Because Marquise Brown presumably is playing Z. Obviously, you'd expect Rondale to be the slot in
Zach
the
Ertz
wide receiver set.
That's who.
The candidates, here's the Cardinals depth chart right now, okay? Here's what we got. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver depth chart. We have Marquise Brown. We have Rondale Moore. We have Greg Dortch. That's probably their three most talented wide receivers, and they're all 5'8" or lower. Beyond that, we have Michael Wilson, Zach Pascal, Andre Bocellia, which I assume is an Andy Isabella impersonation band, Daniel Arias, Auden Tate, Javon Wims, Brian Cobbs. So my question is, like, are they going to ever play a three wide receiver set of Rondale, Dortch, Brown? Or, like, is Michael Wilson going to be running 100% of the routes this year? Is Zach Pascal going to play? Will Auden Tate finally have his moment? Like, what's the situation here?
Former camp MVP Auden Tate is in line, I would say.
Right. By the way, I learned he was on the Cardinals when I looked up the depth chart online. I didn't know that 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, last I heard he was with the Falcons, I think.
Sounds about right.
I think he might have eaten Brian Edwards' lunch. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Brian Edwards, I think, is actually, I don't know, he was with the Chiefs most recently.
Wow. Remember Brian Edwards' season? That was wild.
It was a short season. It was like one overtime, basically.
Yeah, it was like 2 games long and only like the last 2-minute warning.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. But yeah, your question: who if you had to guess, like who's playing wide receiver for the Cardinals?
Nobody that matters. Nobody's playing.
Do you think Rondale? Like, do you think like they're going to actually line up with a formation that includes Rondale and Marquise and Dortch? Like at any point, like is that something viable? Or I guess you don't really probably care about Dortch. Nobody cares about Dortch. But like the better question is, if there's 2 wide receivers on the field at any point, is one of them Rondale? Yeah. That to me is the difference between like this guy is like a decent round 15 best ball pick and this is a guy we should actually acquire.
Yeah, no, I think he's on the field. Like nobody else. No, it's him.
Yeah, I think it's probably not him, but I also think that Michael Wilson is such an egregiously bad prospect that I like don't even care if he runs every route. Like I think that if he runs every route, he's probably going to see like a 12% targets per route run because he's like uniquely bad as a prospect, right? Like it's a 5-year player who is literally never productive. Like
it's rough.
To me, he has like if Michael Wilson was undrafted, he probably wouldn't have made my top 5 UDFAs to add off waivers.
I wonder if Michael Wilson has better stats if you look at per game numbers.
No, you don't actually. Somebody asked and he doesn't.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah, he did miss a couple games of injury, but he wasn't productive in the games that he played either. And what people always forget is that like when you look at the per game chart, now all of a sudden everybody gets to be per game, right? Yeah. So the thresholds now become way higher, right? Yeah. Because everybody's stats would be better with per game. So it's like, yes, Michael Wilson's stats look better per game. So do everyone else's. If you like chart out Michael Wilson's per game stats versus the trend line.
I just kind of feel like if you were going to do it though, you would just do it only for Michael Wilson and then compare it to everyone else's full season stats.
It's true.
And then I think you're okay. Like I think he's not that bad. If you just like commit, a capital crime in data analysis, like you could paint this the right way. It's possible. It's all
it's possible. Yeah, Mike Wilson sucks. Good
recap.
What about Trey McBride? How are you at on Trey McBride?
So Trey McBride is interesting.
I'm legitimately conflicted on how I feel about Trey McBride. And how about this? we're going to talk about Trey McBride. The very next topic on my show sheet, by the way, is a battle of two tight ends who were a day on Twitter, Dulcich and Chigakonkwo. Trey McBride, also a member of that top three from last year's tight end class, at least today's top three of it. They all go in a pretty similar range of the draft, because right now you have Greg Dulcich, tight end 16, Chigakonkwo, tight end 17, Trey McBride, tight end 18. What are your thoughts on Trey McBride, and do you like him better than either of those two tight ends that he goes right in front of?
So I think that I actually got Trey McBride wrong last year, which kind of makes me sad because I ended up with a lot of Trey McBride. Basically, I was really over counting production at the tight end position in prospecting, and not counting athleticism as much as I should, or at least not the high end athleticism. Which McBride is like a fine athlete, but he's not a great athlete. He's just like whatever.
He's sufficient. Yeah.
And then he's not a senior, or he is a senior rather. He was not an early declare. And then like he wasn't drafted that highly, even though he was drafted in the second round. And it's just like, I don't know, like there's just not that many good players that look like this. Like we're talking like Tony Scheffler is like the dude. Like that's not exciting. Jonnu Smith is like a doppelganger. Like it's just not that exciting. Like we got, if you look at only players drafted, let's say rounds 2, 3, and 4, and then you look at Trey McBride's profile, he comes out to like 27 dudes. 3 of them have hit a single top 12 season. And these are like productive guys that were drafted like moderately good, that were seniors, and that's just not very exciting. So I've kind of done a 180 on McBride, and I'm just not that into him, and I'm sorry. I've led you down a path of peril. I originally said go and get Trey McBride. I'm backtracking like a coward. Now that the rubber hits the road, I'm backtracking like a coward, and I'm just not that into him. I'm sorry. Like there's a whole movie about being not that into him. I think it's a book, actually, a book and a movie. It was so powerful as a book, they adapted it to a movie. And here we are not being that into Trey McBride.
Yeah. You hate to see that. I agree with you. I think the problem with the case for McBride is that it's entirely based in prospect profile. And then the portion of the prospect profile is entirely production. Because he was terrible as a rookie for the most part, and doesn't really have that much going for him outside of production as a prospect. And then the bigger issue with that is that, like, of all of the 4 positions, prospect profile probably has the weakest signal at tight end. And then of all of the 4 positions, production makes up the smallest part of the prospect profile at tight end, right? So it's like, of all of the types of players that you would want to be like, trust the prospect profile because he's really productive, a tight end would be the one that you would be least inclined to do that for, right? It's like, we don't really care. Like tight end is a position where the prospect profile is pretty shaky. Like guys that should suck hit kind of all the time. And specifically guys who are drafted high kind of bust, and guys who are drafted low hit, and guys who are really productive, not always great. And guys who aren't very productive, sometimes they're good. So to me, it's like, of any position, I'm the most willing to shift my priors fairly rapidly at tight end. And so with McBride, I think we should stay Bayesian. That to me, I like both. I have both Chig and Dulcich a full tier ahead of Trey McBride in my rankings.
I certainly don't have Chig ahead. That's.
Well, we're going to talk about Chig because I'm going to play the middle ground on Chig between you and the community at large. Trey McBride was not good last year. I'm mildly intrigued. Right. But I also think we've been doing the thing with Zach Ertz we've been doing for a while. Maybe we're going to be right this time. I'm not super sure. Where I would say the last 5 years, it's been more convenient to assume Zach Ertz dead than to assume that he's alive. And so we've chosen to do so, but he has lived, right? Like we were doing this with Goddard before, where it was like, well, if we just assume that Zach Ertz doesn't exist, but then he kept existing. And then last year, we were kind of assuming he didn't exist, that he very much existed. This year, we fully assumed he doesn't exist. Like he's like going like, I don't know, probably around 70. What if he's just like healthy by week 4 and they're like, he's our starting tight end? Like that doesn't seem implausible to me. He was like actually better than McBride was last year. So I don't know. The other thing with McBride too, is like if he sucks this year, he's just stone 0 in value, right?
Yeah, he's got no value retention left. And he probably will suck because it's probably not going to be a good year in Arizona this year.
Yeah, on the bright side, his best games were with the shittiest quarterbacks because he was really good at running 5-yard stick routes, which was what Trace McSorley could throw. And David Blau. I think his best game was with David Blau.
I mean, his best game, yeah, like that's because Ertz got hurt. Like if Ertz didn't get hurt, we'd be talking about we'll have like a Laquan Treadwell rookie year highlight package for Trey McBride.
Well, an important thing to note is that like the sample of Zach Ertz was better than the sample of McBride without Ertz, right? Like it's not like McBride came in, took Ertz's role and was better. It was like McBride came in, took Ertz's role and was worse than Zach Ertz, who's a 32-year-old dustball. Yeah. Right? That's not encouraging. So yeah, I'm a soft no on Trey McBride. I'm back. You have Kyler Murray. You don't have 2 or 3 other starting quarterbacks ready to rock in his replacement. You have your own pick this year. Basically, your choices are you can trade Kyler Murray, you could tank, or you can keep Kyler Murray and try to find a way to keep contending. What are kind of the ways that you're generally approaching this?
Well, the teams in which I roster Kyler Murray in all the metaverse, I would never have traded him. That would be the one thing Doctor Strange would have never seen is me trading Kyler Murray. So I'm not trading Kyler Murray under any circumstance, unless of course somebody's going to drastically overpay and like give me Josh Allen. Like I'll take Josh Allen for Kyler Murray. That's on the table. League mates, if you're listening, just send over your Patrick Mahomes and I'll give you Kyler. That is possible, but that is where we draw the line.
Sure, that's freely available.
Yeah. So I'm not trading. I don't really care what else the rest of my team looks like. It's not happening. If I need to compete despite Kyler Murray being on my team, I'll find a different way. There's other quarterbacks out there. I'll start a wide receiver in my quarterback slot. If it's a super flex league, I will make it happen without trading Kyler Murray. So
good for you.
Just to recap,
take a stand on principle.
Under no circumstances are you to trade Kyler Murray to anyone unless they give you Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. You could also, if you want to trade Kyler Murray and get Jalen Hurts, I'm fine with it.
All right. I'm with you. Yeah, I'm not looking to trade Kyler Murray at all. I think he's probably, maybe I wouldn't say the most mispriced player in Dynasty, but I think he's like the most consequentially mispriced player in Dynasty, just if you factor in like the gravity of him being mispriced versus like a guy that's like, he should go in round 8, but he goes in round 12. Like, doesn't really matter as much.
He's the most mispriced in like the top of the ADP. Like of guys in the first 3 rounds, he's the most mispriced player. He
is by far the cheapest player. Well, maybe Kyle Pitts is, but it's either Murray or Pitts. I would say is like the cheapest player who I think there's like a greater than 50% chance is going to provide you league winning upside within the fairly foreseeable future. So I'm definitely in on Kyler, and I would choose any other option other than trading him away. Yeah, I think with Kyler, it depends what the rest of your team looks like. Obviously, my favorite guys right now, if I have Kyler Murray, I'm paying for Aaron Rodgers. I'm paying for Matthew Stafford. If hopefully you get through this year, I think Rodgers in particular, like the drop off from Murray to Rodgers, it's definitely a drop off, but I don't think it's like team debilitatingly massive. And then if Rodgers retires on your team and dies, like whatever value you will have put into acquiring Rodgers or Stafford will probably be made up and more so by the difference between Kyler's value currently and Kyler's value when he's at full health and he's producing again. And I think like, I don't know when it became a thing that Kyler Murray is a bad real life quarterback. He's like not. I don't know when that became like a common take, but Kyler Murray was the first overall pick with an exemplary prospect profile. He was then like a bad quarterback as a rookie, but not bad for a rookie quarterback. He was like bad in the generic way that every rookie quarterback was bad. And for rookie quarterbacks, he was pretty good. And then in his second year, he was like a league average quarterback, which is pretty darn good for a second year quarterback. And he did it in a way that scored a lot of fantasy points. And then in his third year, he was like literally one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL in like a very real life way.
And I feel like he was an MVP candidate till like week 11 or something.
Yeah. Hey, look, you can't be Splits McGee just when it suits your interests, right? Let's
not
do that until week 11.
That is the power we hold as data analysts, is that we pick when and how to use splits to our advantage.
It's true. Yeah.
It's another Spider-Man thing. Like we have great power, and however that saying goes.
With great splits comes great responsibility. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But whatever, you don't even need to split his season into two because he was just verifiably great in his third year.
Yeah, he was
great real life quarterback, great fantasy quarterback, despite suffering an injury partway through that year. And then in year 4, he was not very good, and the entire team was non-functional and whatever. But I don't see anything sustainably wrong with Kyler. I think to me, there's like 2 main concerns with Kyler that are, or I'll say 3 concerns with Kyler that are actually real. One is that he's injured. That's obviously a very real concern. You cannot play him in your quarterback slot, and he deserves to be valued less because of it. No way around that. Other issues, like the Cardinals are a total joke of an organization at the moment, and they might be competing for the number 1 overall pick without Kyler Murray. And if they get the number 1 overall pick, they probably should trade Kyler Murray and take Caleb Williams, because they're frankly in a place where it'd be better off taking a surefire rookie quarterback on a rookie quarterback contract than paying Kyler at best fair value. I don't see that as a massive issue. Kyler Murray is like demonstrated to be a good NFL quarterback. He will have trade interest. Teams will want him. Like teams will actively want him, and he'll score a lot of fantasy points because he's always scored a lot of fantasy points. And is it that bad to get away from the Cardinals? Like, I think that's probably good to get away from the Cardinals. They're one of the worst run organizations in professional sports. So I think that's probably a net plus for him in any case. And then the other concern about Kyler Murray, I guess, is that they think he likes playing video games too much. But I don't feel like he just started playing video games. Like, he probably played video games his whole life. It's never stopped him from being an exceptionally good quarterback to this point. So I don't personally give a fuck. Yeah, do you have a take?
No, I'm fine with his video game playing. If it hasn't stopped him now, it probably won't. I think one of the things I'll touch on, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford, who I think are like fine acquisitions. I'm not like over the moon about them. The guy that I'd actually probably be looking for though is Ryan Tannehill, because he's like,
but he's probably not locked into 17 starts this year.
Yeah, maybe not. I think he's probably going to start a lot of games, though. At least he's going to start until Kyler Murray starts, probably.
Well, I think that's the other concern is, like, what if they just don't play Kyler all year? I think that's a pretty real concern. I don't mean real as in, like, that's what's going to happen. It's just the whole basis of, like, when does Kyler play and if he plays this year is based in a mix of medical concerns and speculating as to the motivation of the team and player. And I don't have any expertise in any of those areas. So I'm just like shrugging, right? It's like people are like, Kyler's not going to play this year. People are like, Kyler will play this year. I don't know. I don't really have a take on it. I would say that if you have Kyler Murray, I think you should be prepared for the possibility that he doesn't play this year.
Yeah, I think, I would probably say he's going to play football. Like, it's so odd and rare that we would see a healthy football player not playing football. Like, I just can't really see that happening. And like, sure, he could be so injured that he never gets to play, or maybe what we've seen in the past is that players are healthy and they just say that they're injured. The team says, or they say that they're injured, so they don't have to play. I don't really know how that all works, but I can't think of a single time where I've seen an NFL player deemed to be healthy, very good at football, and not on the football field. Like, I can't remember a time that's happened.
Yeah.
And unless you want to cut Lamar Jackson last year. I guess that's the time that it happened, but that was the players doing, and he says he was not healthy. So
right.
Maybe Kyler could do that.
Who knows? Situation. And I mean, that wasn't the Ravens choosing to tank, right? So very different situation. Ravens.
No, they were very much trying to win football.
They were a playoff team. Yeah. I don't know. I think it could happen. I mean, I think it's like probably the optimal move. It's just that, I mean, the one thing that gives me pause, like, but I don't even know in which direction. Like, the one thing that's just weird is it's really weird to me that the Cardinals have not added a legitimate quarterback option. like they currently have Colt McCoy and Clayton Tune.
Isn't Colt McCoy a legitimate quarterback option?
No. I assumed that they would like sign a Brissett or a Heineke or a Teddy Bridgewater or a Baker or a Carson Wentz, like one of these guys who's like either like kind of high-end backup-y, fringe starter-y type of player. And then they would hold down the fort for Kyler and potentially start the entire season if that's the way it went. To me, you can take it one of two ways, right? Like you can either be like, oh, they haven't invested all in the quarterback position because they're expecting Kyler to be sooner than later. I think that's probably unlikely. I think what it might signal is that they're like, no, actually, we really do want to lose a lot of games this year. Like we are A-okay with losing all of the games this year. Like we're so okay with losing that we're totally fine with shamelessly starting Colt McCoy as our week 1 quarterback while Teddy Bridgewater is currently unemployed.
I mean, I feel like there's a chance, and I could be wrong, but like sometimes teams just start bad quarterbacks. Like I've seen a lot of talk that Brock Purdy might be starting football games this year.
Oh, come
on purpose.
Come on, this isn't a good faith comment by you. This is a bad faith comment.
Well, I don't know. Colt McCoy sucks. Who cares? It doesn't really matter. It is hard to believe that they haven't signed like a Teddy Bridgewater. Like that seems like the logical thing to do. He's a good locker room guy, allegedly, and he's competent at football. He's not great, but he can play football. I wouldn't be shocked if they like trade for like Drew Lock or something like that, and Drew Lock ends up starting football games, or
right,
like something along those lines. Or like,
I guess like they drafted Clayton Tune, so like they could always just like play him, right? I mean, he's almost assuredly horrible, but
Brock Purdy played games last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tune gets in there eventually.
Like, 5th rounder? Yeah, 505. He can play football games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
2 rounds ahead of Brock Purdy.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Cardinal fan, like you'd probably rather watch Clayton Tune play football on a 1-10 team than Colt McCoy.
Clayton Tune is the number 2 most athletic quarterback in this draft class, I've just realized.
Incredible.
Courtesy of Player Profiler, they have this new thing. It says like QB position, 2023 class rank, just below the normal stuff. He's number 2. He's basically discount Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson could start football games this year. If we want to talk about bad football players starting football games, we have Anthony Richardson, we have Brock Purdy, we have Colt McCoy. Like the league is full of it. So it's perfectly fine.
All right. I wish you disconnected again before bringing up these bad faith claims, but that'll wrap up the Cardinals portion. We teased it a little bit because we talked about Trey McBride. But I do want to get into Dulcich versus Chig. This was another day that you missed out on, where we talked about would you rather have Chig or would you rather have Dulcich. It is really interesting in that we have these 2 tight ends that are both in the same draft class that go literally back to back. They go tight end 16, 17, not exactly back to back in overall. It's 1204 versus 1207, but more or less 2 young tight ends that have pretty much the exact same trade value. Which one is your guy?
It's interesting because we just talked about Trey McBride, and I was like, I don't really like him. Like he just doesn't check a lot of these boxes that I'm looking for. Greg Dulcich is the same guy, and for the same reasons, I don't really like him as a prospect. But then when he played football in the NFL this year, he had a 17.2% target share, which is pretty freaking good for a rookie tight end, and then also had a 10.6 ADOT, which means that he was getting the ball way down the field. He's number 3 in the NFL among tight ends in average depth of target, which is incredible. So the Greg Dulcich rookie year has like propelled him into something I'm excited about. I'm not like pounding the table like Greg Dulcich on your team. I'm certain he's awesome, but I'm like, hey, like if there's a guy that's going to be awesome, I'm probably going to bet on something like this. And then, like, he wasn't even drafted that low. He was a 3rd-round pick.
Right, he was a 3rd-round pick. He was productive. Fine. And what was interesting about him is, like, I know that he wasn't a supreme athlete.
He's got great hair and an awesome mustache. Don't forget
he does
that.
Have great hair and an awesome mustache. He does. Like, I understand that he wasn't a supreme athlete. He was a sufficient athlete. He was in that same kind of not incredible but not bad athlete class. But what was always interesting to me about Dulcich as a prospect was that his profile got you the stuff that athleticism theoretically gets you, right? Like, why do we want tight end prospects who are athletic? Theoretically, it's because either they're really good after the catch or they can get downfield. And Dulcich got downfield. He got downfield throughout college at UCLA, and he got downfield last year as a rookie tight end. And so that's what's the most interesting to me is like, okay, sure, he doesn't run that fast at a straight line in Indianapolis in shorts or his pro day or whatever he did, but he clearly has enough functional athleticism to the point that he had a freaking ADOT of 10.6, right? That's a wide receiver level ADOT. That's literally double Rondale Moore's ADOT. That was number 3 among all tight ends, right?
That's like 5x Deebo Samuel.
Yeah. And then you add that to the fact that he has 17.2% target share, right? That's basically a wide receiver level. Like, how much time have we spent talking about George Pickens and Jahan Dotson this offseason, right? Yeah. They both had lower target shares than Greg Dulcich this year. They both did it on higher route participation than Greg Dulcich, and now higher ADOTs. But like, again, we're talking about, unlike some like drag route merchants, like Greg Dulcich is running real wide receiver routes and he's seeing a real rookie wide receiver target share, and there should be some expectation for that to grow, right? So I think it's important that we be really bullish about Greg Dulcich. You never know with tight ends. Most of them don't matter. We see tight ends pop and then suck because they seem to be very scheme dependent, and coaches are finicky with how they want to use certain tight ends. And I think Dulcich is undersized and he has blocking issues. But like, if you were to make a case for what do you want to see out of a rookie tight end, I'd look at the guy with the mustache and the long hair. I'd be like, him. That's what I want to see. So yeah, I'm in. What do you say though to Chig, who different profile? He's a little shorter, a little smaller. Wish I was a baller. Wish I was a little bit taller. I think I got that backwards. Anyway, he was another guy where to be entirely honest with you, this is like very much, I guess, how I view the tight end position. Can't say that I knew who Chigozie Okonkwo was before the NFL draft. That being said, after drafts were finished, I looked him up and I saw that he was drafted in the 4th round and ran a 4.52. And I said, that's good enough for me. And I put in a UDFA claim on him in every single one of my leagues, and he became my most rostered player overnight. He goes on to lead all tight ends in yards per route run, obscenely high targets per route run. That being said, did it on just a route participation of 30.3%. What do you make of Mr. Okonkwo? You're vocally against Mr. Okonkwo, I believe.
I'm vocally against Mr. Okonkwo. I think like, he's small, and while he's fast, he's also not super athletic. Like, he doesn't even hit my low tier RAS threshold.
Well, that's entirely due to height, right? Like, that's basically double counting height because he ran a 4.52, so he's plenty fast.
I don't care about his height. He wasn't fast enough given.
Well, you do count. You do care about his height because it would be functionally impossible for him to be a great RAS score player when you're 6'2" at tight end.
He could run a 4.33. Like, what's his name? What's Vernon Davis? He could have Vernon Davis, but he wasn't. That's not my fault. That's his fault. So,
right, I just want you to specify about what it is that you are angry about, because you're not actually angry that he's slow. He's literally not slow. He ran a 4.52. That's extremely fast. But he's not, though. He's just short. He's not a non-athlete. He's just short.
He's not a non-athlete. He's just short. Have you seen his agility score? His agility score
is very mediocre.
And he's 6'2". Do you know how broken that is? Right. That's like probably a size-adjusted agility score of like 0th percentile. Which is really bad.
Very possible.
Like 0th isn't like the top end. That's the bottom end of the percentiles.
Right. So if you were to guess, Chig Okonkwo is 6'2", 243. We just talked about his agility score, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to name a tight end. Okay. You want to guess who this tight end is? This tight end is 6'2", 242 pounds. So the exact same height and 1 pound lighter, basically the exact same size. His agility score is 11.65. So 0.01 worse, as in like higher. So just basically exact same height, exact same weight, exact same agility score. I'm going to keep giving more clues. Do you want to guess now? I'll give one more clue if you're wrong.
I don't know who it is.
Well,
I can't think of another tight end that's 6'2". Niles Paul?
I don't know how you thought of that name. Like, I have no idea how that name came into your brain, but no, that's not him. I'll give you the next hint. The next hint is that he ran a 4.63, so he's actually slower than Chig, but he's still fast if you ignore that he's tiny.
For the record, Niles Paul is a phenomenal agility score. Okay. 99th percentile, so I was way off.
I'm glad that we clarified that so that Niles Paul is no longer disrespected.
Niles Paul's mom, if you're listening, just know that we know that Niles Paul was done dirty by the NFL.
Okay.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay, next clue. I'm going to make this easier. He was drafted with the 18th pick of the second round.
I can't think of a 6'2" tight end that's
next
good.
Clue. Next clue. He is currently 24 years old and still in the NFL. He plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. His father had the same name that he did.
This is a tight end we're talking about?
Yes.
I was like,
he shares a last name with a famous British rock band.
The Beatles.
No, it's Irv Smith Jr.
Oh, Irv Smith. Yeah, that's a great one. 6'2", unathletic. Yes, that's right. I thought you were trying to come up with a good tight end. I'm like, I can't think of any.
No, I was trying to come up with. No, I'm telling you, this is like literally who Chig is. He's Irv Smith.
Yeah, that's rough. That's not a feather in your cap type of comp. No, Niles Paul, on the other hand, would have been exciting.
Only. Yeah, you could have. No one could have been in denials about Chigakonkwo in that case.
Okay, but then also, like, he's also small and unathletic, and then he's also, like, for his size, he's unathletic. Right. And then also, he was a senior, and he was also unproductive, and he was also a fourth-round pick. Like, there's just not a lot to get excited about other than they threw to him at an incredible rate when he was on the field, but they didn't put him on the field because he's not very good. So and then furthermore, if we were like, hey, let's find a tight end that's going to smash, the Tennessee Titans are the team I'm going to go to. Like, absolutely not. So I don't know. I'm not that excited about Chigakonkwo. I think he's very, very likely to be completely irrelevant by next offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't think he'll be like irrelevant in the NFL sense, in that I think he's like quite a useful player.
Yeah, he's like
he was
Irv
really,
Smith.
really good in his role. No, he's better than Irv Smith. Irv Smith actually sucks. Like, Irv Smith's bad, but I do think that
I'm not sure that we can have any definitive conclusion that Chigakonkwo. I don't think we have any definitive conclusion that Chig is good at football either.
No, I think like if you are a rookie tight end and you post over 2 yards per route run, you're a useful NFL player. That's the rule.
But what about the sample size?
Right, the sample size is tiny. This is the thing. Chigakonkwo basically
has
one thing.
Than he is.
Right. Okay. This is the thing, right? We basically had the best chance that this archetype of tight end was ever going to have was probably Irv Smith, because he went to Alabama and he was drafted in round 2, and it didn't work out. Right. So Chigakonkwo was like the worst prospect, Irv Smith, and he hit an awesome efficiency season. I think that he has utility in an offense where he can be kind of a matchup nightmare. You split him up as an H-back, and he gets on the linebacker, and he's faster than that linebacker, and he moves down the field. The problem is like he just isn't that every now and guy. He's not the freak athlete. He lacks agility, and he lacks size, and that's the biggest thing. When you are a 6'2" tight end, you don't get to play in 11 personnel. I'm sorry, you don't. You don't get to, because they put you on the field in 11 personnel, and everybody knows they're passing because you're 6'2", 242. You're not blocking anybody. You're smaller than Chase Claypool. Right? Like, so it's just, that's a severe issue. And so I think he's always going to be a part-time guy. I think his realistic ceiling case is mostly to be a Robert Tonyan-esque player where he's running 50 to 60% of the routes in certain packages, and he's efficient and he has these spike seasons, but then he becomes irrelevant. Like, I just think it's going to be intermittent with Chig. I mean, he could basically just be Johnny Smith, who is ironically in Tennessee, right, already, and have kind of that same kind of like, oh, he sparks up and he has some good numbers, but it's just never going to work out. I mean, I'm interested. Like, the tight end position is starved for enough upside that I'm willing to take a shot on just about anybody. But for the most part, I've sold about half my Chig shares, and I'm okay if I get all the way down to being at market from what was once like 25 shares of Chig Okonkwo. I think that it's like a way thinner bet than Greg Dulcich, And Greg Dulcich is also undersized. But if you think about like my main concern for Greg Dulcich,
close.
He's close, right? But like it's like a whole nother level, right? It's like you know, it's like the Jahmyr Gibbs is undersized to Devin Etienne is undersized to Deuce Vaughn is undersized. It's like, okay, they're all undersized, but there's very different levels of undersized, right? Yeah. And it's like the other nice thing with Dulcich is, again, like he has the draft capital. He has the college production. With Chig, it's like one of those things where it's like literally all he has is this really high yards per out run, targets per out run in this very small role. And it's like, what's more likely? The small, tiny little sample is wrong, or everything else about him is wrong? It's like, probably it's the small, tiny little sample that's wrong. Like if you just think about every possible tight end who goes through every single permutation, like one of the ones who runs 30% of the routes will eventually have 250-yard plays. That's just kind of how randomness works, right? If you flip a coin 100 times, each individual time, it's 50% chance it's going to be a heads or a tail. But if you flip 100 coins 100 times, in some of the 100 times, you're going to flip 70 heads. It's just like the way it's going to go, right? Like you don't expect it, but it's going to happen. That doesn't mean that coin is special. That just means that you've identified the coin that happened to flip heads more often. Chig is probably that coin, where he happens to be the outlier that hits in the rookie year, whereas more likely we're not going to see that again. So I think I'm definitely team Greg Dulcich on this one. He's the more conventional prospect, and there's a lot to like. I would definitely pay to move Chig to Greg Dulcich. And I'll say to this, the last thing, people are concerned about Sean Payton. He gave a vague quote that said, I have to watch Greg Dulcich, basically, where he was like, I need to see what's going on there. Or it's like, it's hard to watch him or something because everything was a mess. That was used by a beat reporter to suggest that they thought that the Denver Broncos were going to draft a tight end early. They didn't. They didn't. The only tight ends that they added were Chris Manhurst, who's basically a swing tackle. And then they traded for Adam Troutman. I don't know if you missed Greg Dulcich today on Twitter. I know that you did. People told me that the guy to own in Denver is Adam Troutman, and I wanted to ask you if you think that there's a possibility that the guy to own is Adam Troutman.
I do not think that is a possibility, and that's hilarious. And do you remember that year that the Saints literally had like nobody over, I don't know, like an 18% target share? Adam Troutman was on that team and had like I swear it was like 11%. I don't have it in front of me, but I remember thinking it was embarrassingly low. And that was nobody good on the team. Nobody was. Yeah,
because he's never ran like over 50% of the routes. Like he plays snaps, and sometimes he runs routes, and sometimes he blocks. Like he's mostly a blocking tight end. Which, okay, I'll say this: it is possible that Greg Dulcich does not run a lot of routes, and one of the players who plays on the field when Greg Dulcich is not on the field is Adam Troutman. Like it's possible that Greg Dulcich busts. And that one of the reasons he busts, he doesn't know rough routes, and then he's not running routes, and Adam Troutman is the one on the field. That's like conceivable. In that world, Adam Troutman still sucks. Like all that means is that then they've just decided we don't care about getting receiving production out of the tight end position. We're going to use it as a sixth offensive lineman. We're going to rotate Troutman and Manhurst, and all the targets are going to Judy and Sutton and whoever else. Like that's that world, right? The world in which they want to have receiving production out of the tight end. It's Greg Dulcich. Frankly, it's more likely to be Albert O than it is to be Adam Troutman, and it's not very likely to be Albert O.
I was just going to say the hilarious thing about this Chig Okonkwo thing, this Chig thing, is that it reminds me almost to a T the Albert. Oh man, like what is?
Except Albert O was like actually better than Chig. Like he actually like had somewhat of a college profile, and he wasn't 6'2".
Yeah, but it's the same thing, like super high target rate, super low snap rate, super efficient on the targets that he ran. And yeah, it's eerily similar, the same arguments being made. in both cases. The difference, of course, is that I would much rather have Alberto in that circumstance coming out of year one. Not even, easily Alberto. But anyways, Albert O feels like a sneaky buy to me at this point. He's free, and
I agree.
Nobody cares about him. And he's 25 years old, and he's 6'6", and he's 258. All the things people loved about him for the first 3 years or 2 years of his career, are still there.
The only thing we learned about him since is that a coach who's no longer there didn't want to play him.
Yeah.
And a coach, by the way, who we all think sucks, right? Right, exactly. And I would infer that, well, honestly, earlier in the offseason, I actually thought it was a pretty decent chance that Alberto might actually be the starting tight end for the Broncos. Not pretty decent as in over 50, but 10%. Just because I looked at it and it's Dulcich is pretty small. I was like, what if they don't want to do a tight end platoon like they kind of did last year, where it was Dulcich played almost all the passing snaps, and then they used other tight ends on the run snaps. And I've always just thought that's a stupid way to use personnel, because I just don't think it's good to use personnel packages that tell the defense when you're running and when you're passing. So I was like, what if they use the 6'5", 256 guy instead of the 6'3" guy? And then they went out and signed Chris Manhurst, and they traded for Adam Troutman, which to me is really bullish for Greg Dulcich, because what do you want if you're I can only play in receiving packages tight end? You want to be paired with an I can only play in blocking packages tight end, right?
Yeah.
When the Jaguars went out and got Chris Manhurst last year, I was like, yes, that's exactly what you want. That guy is a swing tackle, right? So to me, the fact that they kept adding to their tight end room with players who complement Dulcich tells me Alberto is probably not in their plans, but you also never know what their plans are, right? It could change. And I think more likely, Alberto is a guy who's going to wind up on a team somewhere and maybe get a shot, and I'm still semi-interested. So he's a great guy to take in the 30th round of your startup for sure.
Yeah, and also
tight ends are weird, man. Tight ends break out at 28 all the time.
And happens. Also if Albert O is on the Broncos, and then Greg Dulcich gets hurt, and all they have is swing tackles left, Albert O could be on the field. Right. And maybe Russell Wilson likes Albert O. Russell Wilson passed to that one guy in Seattle a whole bunch, and he was awful.
What was Will Dissly, Big Montana.
Will Dissly, yeah, he passed to Will Dissly repeatedly, and that guy was awful. So
we threw to Alberto when Alberto played. Remember when they fired Hackett, and then the new coach came in, and they were like, I don't know why we never played this guy, and then they played him and he caught a touchdown immediately.
It's possible is all I'm saying.
Right.
And if it happens to any degree, people are going to look at it and be like, oh man, remember this guy's 6'6", 5'8", and runs a 4.59? Oh, and he was super efficient for his first 2 years. Yeah, it's Albert O season. Let's go. And we have an absolutely easily bankable second round pick coming back that we got for waivers. So Albert
this
O
is
an attractive.
This is the key thing to know about the Sean Payton thing is everybody's downgrading Dulcich because of one really vague Payton quote that was not bullish, but it wasn't really bearish, and all it was being used in the article was to say that they might do something they didn't do. Here's the other thing about Sean Payton. His tight ends are fucking awesome.
They're Jimmy Graham.
But they're not just Jimmy Graham. Jared Cook had one of his best seasons ever with Sean Payton. Benjamin Watson had his best season ever with Sean Payton. Sean Payton has had good tight end seasons with total bums.
Jared Cook came from the Raiders to the Saints, and he did the same thing with the Raiders, though, didn't he?
Yeah, but he had a really good season with the Saints, and that's a pretty similar type of tight end.
Him being good at football, though.
He's okay at football. I mean, he had a very long career.
He was Albert O. He was a super freak, wasn't he?
Right, but I'm saying but here's the thing.
Broke out at 28, like you're saying.
Right, but if you're comparing guys to Greg Dulcich, where it's this guy's kind of situational, he's really more of a receiving only tight end, he's not a complete that is Jared Cook.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Jared, that was the thing on Jared Cook was he couldn't really find a home. He started off in. I can't remember the order of things, but he spent time in Tennessee and with the Rams. And I can't remember if he started in Tennessee and went to the Rams or if it was the Rams and Tennessee. But he could never really find a home. And then he found one with the Raiders for a bit. And then he found one with the Saints. Jared Cook played a lot of years. And in most of them, he was useless. And in one of the years that he wasn't useless, it was with Sean Payton, and he's like the exact type of player as Greg Dulcich. We also saw Benjamin Watson. Again, like Benjamin Watson played a million years in the NFL. And his best year by a lot was with the New Orleans Saints. And then this guy didn't work out, but Sean Payton went out of his way to acquire Coby Fleener, who didn't do anything with the Saints, and he got hurt immediately. But like Coby Fleener is exactly also this type of tight end, right? This like purely a receiving option tight end. Like, so Sean Payton does like this type of tight end.
He's got a tight.
Right, like he likes this type of tight end. So it's weird to me that people like don't think he would like Greg Dulcich when historically he's always gone out of his way to get exactly this type of Greg Dulcich-y tight end. And so anyway, and then the other thing is like, it's Adam Troutman's guy. Adam Troutman had 434 receiving yards in 2 years with Sean Payton. If that's Sean Payton's guy, like maybe it's his guy that he likes seeing him around. Maybe he enjoys his personality. Maybe he thinks he's a good blocker. It's not his guy to throw to. He didn't throw to him before. He's not going to throw to him now.
That's going to be a hard pass.
One of the most ridiculous people on in fantasy world. Let's do one other team that has cycled through the days, right? Cycled through the days. Jacksonville Jaguars. We've had 2 days devoted to the Jacksonville Jaguars. One of them, we'll start with the running backs, was the Travis Etienne versus Tank Bigsby day, in which I think is one of the weirdest false choices that we've ever had. What are your thoughts on Travis Etienne? Because we've talked about Tank a little bit more specifically with the rookie draft. So let's start on this from the Etienne perspective. What are your current thoughts on Travis Etienne after the addition of Tank Bigsby in this backfield as a whole?
Well, I think that Etienne is kind of like, it's funny. I've always kind of had this opinion of him that he's not like a true like grinder running back. Like he's more of like a finesse efficiency type running back. And then I don't know, for some reason that's always just stuck with me from that standpoint. And then they drafted like another running back who's probably pretty good, whose name is Tank, which probably is not very finessey. And I'm like, this seems like a thunder and lightning type of situation. And I'm like, that's actually probably what's good for Etienne. As long as he gets to be the pass catcher of the two, I think he's going to do really well. I don't know that he's going to be, breaking fantasy in a Christian McCaffrey-esque way, but I think he's going to be a wide receiver or a running back one. Like I think that's very possible. This offense is also probably going to be pretty freaking good this year, and I'm I'm kind of excited for Travis Etienne. I'm not over the moon necessarily. If they had not drafted Tank Bigsby, I'd be more bullish on Travis Etienne.
Right, for sure.
But I'm not writing him off like this is a death sentence for Travis Etienne. I think it could be. I'm certainly not thinking he's scot-free here. They didn't draft Deuce McAllister or anything like that. No, who's that? Which Deuce?
Who the heck is Deuce? Oh, Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn. Deuce McAllister is an old running back. You don't.
Yeah, I know who Deuce McAllister is, but he hasn't played NFL football in a decade.
Oh, probably longer. Anyway,
was he still on the team when they drafted Reggie Bush? I think he might have been.
I don't think so.
Maybe. It's been a long time for Deuce McAllister, though.
Possible.
That's a pullback.
Yeah. Anyway, they didn't draft Deuce Vaughn, so it's certainly not.
Or Deuce McAllister.
Or Deuce McAllister. That would have been even worse.
That would be great for Etienne. He's competing against the 52-year-old.
Well, yeah, I guess. I got to think he's still got something left in the tank though for drafting him.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyways, I think I'm just I'm lukewarm on Etienne. I would listen to a trade if somebody wanted to trade him to me. I would use him to get into a player that I really, really like if somebody wanted to unload one of those really, really awesome players. And otherwise, I'm probably just sitting on Etienne and seeing how it all plays out. I think between Etienne and Tank, I think if one of them gets hurt, it's wheels up for the other guy. I think this is one of those situations where we probably get full-blown workhorse if one of them is removed from the situation rather than backup comes in, the backup comes in and we still keep splitting. And then as far as Tank goes, I can't believe how cheap Tank is. So just give him to me. I want him in every team, in every draft, in every format. I just want Tank on my squad. And I think the very simple explanation is show me a bad running back named Tank.
Call.
We can leave it at that. Like, that's as far as you need to go.
Perfect call. I love that. Show me a bad running back named Tank. Absolutely not. I can't show you a bad running back named Tank. How could I? Anyhow, I just think the biggest thing that people miss about this is I just don't think that you actually have to pick a team here. Like, I don't think that the most attractive part of Tank Bigsby's range of outcomes is like whether he takes 45% of the work or 35% of the work from Travis Etienne. Like, these are just varying degrees of uselessness. Like, I don't really care that much about it. Like, okay, from like a really long-term dynasty perspective, I guess his range of outcomes somewhat depends on Travis Etienne, in that best case scenario for Tank Bigsby is that he plays himself eventually over a 2-year period, more or less to a draw with Travis Etienne, such that they decide we don't need to pay Travis Etienne. We're going to let him walk, and Tank Bigsby is going to be our starter moving forward. Like, that's probably the best long-term option. In the intermediate, I don't care what you think about Travis Etienne, but he is the most talented running back on this team currently until proven otherwise. And he was an extremely efficient rusher last year. He was a very effective rusher, and not just from a boom-bust perspective. Like, you look throughout the numbers, he was high success rate running back. He was a high yards after contact running back. He was a high yards over expectation running back. Every aspect of running the ball, he performed really well on. It would not behoove them to give him a bunch of less carries. To me, all the people that are saying he needs to have a lot less carries are just people who didn't like him as a prospect. And frankly, I think we're mostly incorrect. I don't think that Travis Etienne's a perfect running back. I think he is somewhat mistake prone. And certainly in the receiving game, there was, I think, a worthy debate over, is he the type of receiver that he showed to be in his last year at Clemson? Or was that kind of just a mirage of them wanting to get an explosive player out in space? And his first year would show that in that count, the film grinders were probably correct. It was probably just a mirage to get him out in space, because he was not a very impressive receiver from a volume perspective, although he was very efficient as a receiver in rookie year, which makes sense, because what is he good at? He's great at being explosive in space, not necessarily a natural route runner, not necessarily a natural hands catcher. The weird thing is that I think sometimes people like to just, whatever running back that they don't like, they just automatically put the traits that that running back lacks onto whoever the other running back is without actually inspecting any of the traits of the other running back. Like, to me, it's like people look at Etienne and they're like, not good enough in short yardage, and you can't rely on him in the pass game, like, takes too many risks. And that's why they're going to go with reliable Tank Bigsby. And it's like, have you ever watched Tank Bigsby? Because that's not actually Tank Bigsby. Like, I would not describe him in that way. I would actually describe him as a running back who does take a lot of risks in the run game and is a boomer bust runner, and a running back who is an adequate pass catcher, but not an acceptable pass catcher. Like, I wouldn't look at Tank Bigsby. Of all of the running backs in this class, Tank Bigsby is not the running back who I would say is the one who most complements Travis Etienne. In fact, I think, like, I compared Tank Bigsby coming out of college to Tevin Coleman, who is, ironically, who a lot of people who don't like Travis Etienne compare Travis Etienne to. Like,
that was me.
Right. Like, I actually think that they're more similar than they are different. I actually think it's more like we want to kind of have the same style of back who fits our system really well. And I think that Tank does fit the system really well, and be able to use that back 100% of the time instead of having to mess around with Jermichael Hasty's and Dearness Johnsons, who aren't NFL players. So to me, that's where I look at it. I don't actually think it's going to be this really neat split of roles that people are kind of assuming that it's going to be, which to me makes both backs really exciting, in the sense that I think Etienne does have a pretty legit ceiling. I don't think that we know enough about him. We've seen him play one season of NFL football, and he had a really good prospect profile. I don't think it's like a crazy thing at all that in his second season, he becomes a lot better at the aspects that he's not currently perfect. I think that's really freaking plausible. And I think that if he's awesome, they'll just let him keep carrying the ball. I don't think that Tank Bigsby has to stop him. I also think Tank Bigsby is really exciting, because we don't have to assume that everything we like about Travis Etienne is true once we're no longer eligible to draft Travis Etienne, and we're now looking at drafting Tank Bigsby. Now we can invite those other aspects of the range of outcomes into things where he's not all that good and he's actually just Miles Sanders. And now we get to look at Tank Bigsby in a whole new light. And most of all, they each have a lot of contingent upside, right? One of these guys gets hurt. The other guy has no obvious cap on sort of what they can take over, because they do, I think, each in their own way have some level of plausible 3-down upside, at least on a contingent basis. So I'm really into Tank Bigsby. He's my most drafted rookie in rookie drafts. Number one. It doesn't make me out on Etienne. I don't think you have to be like out on Etienne. I wouldn't describe myself as in on Etienne either. I can just kind of see both sides of it. But I'm really in on Bigsby. And I also just think people have been really weird about how they've talked about Travis Etienne for years. And it's become like a weird war on Twitter that has lost interest in the truth.
Yeah, totally. I think we should just rush on the boat. Like, I think you're making a really good point when you're talking about Tank Bigsby's like best long range plan is basically like the Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard type of thing, where you're the understudy who forces their hand, and then the expensive guy gets moved on. And I think that's totally plausible for Tank Bigsby. And I think we've only got potentially 2 more years of Travis Etienne. So I wouldn't expect Tank Bigsby to necessarily take all the work this year. But by year 2, I wouldn't be shocked if we're looking at more of a 50-50 split. Right now, I would probably expect and it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be like this guy is the short yardage guy and this guy is the long down and distance guy. I think it's going to be a series split. Like this guy.
I totally agree with you. Yes.
Like Etienne plays 2 series and then Bigsby plays 1 or something like that.
Yes.
And some games we're going to get really high usage for either like really high usage for Etienne because his drives happen to be awesome. And then some games we're going to get really high usage for Bigsby because Etienne's drive stalled out and Bigsby had a couple of nice drives or what have you. And I think like it's going to be fairly even from that standpoint, from like a role perspective. Like I think Tank Bigsby is probably going to catch some passes. I don't think it's just going to be Travis Etienne running out there every time there's a long down and distance or a third down or what have you. Like I think it's just going to be kind of a weird, uneven split for now. And then someday it could be 50-50. And then someday it's probably Etienne is put out to pasture and Bigsby takes over the role.
Yeah, I think you just look at how some of these teams first of all, I think that what you laid out is very possible, but I think it's mostly up to Travis Etienne. Like I just don't think that the 88th overall pick demands the shape of how teams operate. I think that the 25th overall pick gets to decide that. Like I think if Travis Etienne just comes out and he's everything we've ever hoped and dreamed of, then I think that whatever tags Bigsby is more or less irrelevant. Like I think that, frankly, we have seen teams spend 3rd-round picks on running backs while having really good running backs that don't factor into shit, right? Yeah, we saw Alexander Mattison back up behind Dalvin Cook. Darrington Evans was drafted behind Derrick Henry. Who cares? I think Tank Bigsby's better than those guys. I'm more interested in Tank Bigsby than those guys. But I think that if Tank Bigsby was the guy that the Vikings drafted behind Dalvin Cook, that wouldn't have meant that they were going to give Dalvin Cook less carries. Like they still would have just given Dalvin Cook all the carries. So I think if Etienne is awesome, then Etienne's going to be awesome, and Bigsby is a contingent value guy. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of uncertainty there, and to some extent, there's signal in them deciding to pick him. But I think that there's also signal in the type of back that they draft. Like you mentioned about the series, I totally agree. To me, if they were like, Etienne is good at some things and bad at some things, and we need a running back who's good at the things that Etienne's bad at, they draft Roschon Johnson to me. Like that's the guy where it's like he's the big banger and he pass blocks, and so he's going to be like the short yardage and 3rd down guy, and Etienne's going to be between the 20s. I don't think that's Tank. I think he's more or less Etienne, and we see teams operate very different styles of splits, right? Like some split based on usage, some split based on like very specific types of plays that they want to run. Like some guys get the outside zones and some guys get the inside zones, and the other teams are like, we don't want to give anything away. So we basically want to have 2 running backs that we can use in all situations, but we don't want to put 100% of the touches on any of them. So we're just going to have all of our snaps covered with 2 backs who can do everything. To me, that's this backfield. Like I think they're going to be used similarly when they're on the field, and Etienne's going to be on the field more, and then Tank's going to be on the field.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Yeah, like I think Bigsby's prices, it's insane not to roster.
Oh, it's a smash. It's a smash. For sure. I mean, I think it's just to me, I don't even think you have to think about Travis Etienne to get in on Tank Bigsby. To me, the case is I think Tank Bigsby is a good prospect. He got day 2 capital. He goes to a great offense, and there's several outs, right? It's like there's contingent value outs. There's Travis Etienne's not that good outs. There's 2 years from now outs. There's all the outs. It's just that I want to bet on Bigsby because I'm interested in the talent, and he plays with the Jags. That's an offense we want people on.
Isn't that funny to say out loud? Imagine saying that
weird,
2 years ago, right? Like, whoa.
Although they've had a lot of good running backs over the time, right?
Yeah,
like JD, Fred Taylor, Leonard Fournette. Like they've had a lot of fantasy RB1 seasons for a really sad sack team.
Oh yeah.
Maybe they have that because they draft running backs at 4 overall when they suck.
And then at 25th overall when they already have a like reasonably good UDFA that just pops.
Yeah, maybe they just keep having good running back seasons because they just keep drafting running backs, and maybe that's also why they've been so bad.
Could play into it.
Yeah. But no, I like it. Last thing we'll talk about, also a Jaguar take. We saw a little bit of a debate start today. I quote tweeted something that was on the subject of Calvin Ridley versus Christian Kirk.
Let's stop there for a second. I don't think you should be quote tweeting people on Twitter. It makes them upset.
Oh, well, I will continue to do it.
What did you quote tweet? Tell me.
Oh, it was actually a pretty respectful quote tweet. So football, this of course is a Dynasty show. This was a redraft take, but I think we can really talk about it in either sense. Frankly, I think the conversation's mostly the same. And said, I was from Football Guys, and it said, drafters prefer Calvin Ridley to Christian Kirk. Our experts prefer Kirk to Ridley. Who's right? And I said, I think the experts are right in over 50% of the outcomes, meaning Kirk would be better. But if one of these players is going to be a top 5 wide receiver this year, it's definitely not going to be Christian Kirk. Give me Ridley every day and twice on Sundays. And some people agree with this. Some people disagree with this. Seems like every expert at this point, it's like one of those things where it's an interesting enough battle that, like a presidential campaign where it's like, there's like a few issues that every candidate needs to have their side on record. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-cap and trade, I'm anti-cap and trade, whatever the issues are of the day. This is one of those in the fantasy streets. Everybody needs to have declared officially for House Ridley, declared for House Kirk. Everybody has some sort of graphic of them saying something on a podcast. This is our chance. Who are you declaring for? Of course, for those that don't know, Drew is the preeminent Christian Kirk scholar in the fantasy streets. I don't think anybody likes Christian Kirk more. So I can only assume that, of course, you are backing Christian Kirk.
It is true that I am the preeminent Christian Kirk scholar in the fantasy streets. However, in this particular instance, I think that would be like we just saw Christian Kirk play with breakout Trevor Lawrence and pretty much not a whole lot else, like Zay Jones and Marvin Jones and Evan Ingram, who are all fine football players. And he put up wide receiver 18, somewhere around there. Like he was a mid-range wide receiver 2, which is good. Like where we were getting him 2 years ago for like the last, honestly, like after his rookie year, it just like plummeted down to earth. And we've just been buying him so cheap for the last several years. And then we get a wide receiver 2 finish. And then there's this saying, pigs get slaughtered. And basically what it means is don't get greedy.
Is that a saying?
Yeah, it is. I'm from Saskatchewan.
It feels like a sad commentary on the pork industry.
Yeah, I'm from Saskatchewan. We're pretty crude out there. And pigs get slaughtered. And basically what it means is that if you are greedy, don't get over greedy. Like we got what we came for. We got our wide receiver 2 season. Now we sail off in the sunset and we go get Calvin Ridley, because if Calvin Ridley hits, it's probably better than what Christian Kirk did. He's probably not going to be. Like I don't think that's a necessary likely outcome, but it's not priced like it's a likely outcome either, so I'm fine with it. But it's really hard to envision that Christian Kirk is better next year than he was this year. Like, I don't really know how you can construct any rationale to that being the case, other than Trevor Lawrence like breaking passing records like that. I guess that's in the range of outcomes, but I wouldn't be betting on it, and therefore I'm probably just going to go ahead and bet on Ridley with a little bit of the appeal of the unknown. Like it could be a boat in the box. Who knows? And if it is, then I'm going to be really happy. But Christian Kirk's definitely not a boat in the box. So, yeah, I don't know. Christian Kirk's just he's just a floor play in a game where floor plays don't really make a difference to whether or not you won or not. If you want to get wide receiver 2 production, you can probably do it for a lot less than what you're going to pay for Christian Kirk right now.
Right. This is, to me, again, a false choice in the sense that, like, you aren't actually deciding Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk. You're deciding Calvin Ridley or anybody else, including Christian Kirk, and Christian Kirk or anybody else, including Christian Kirk. And there's obviously a lot of players you can select that are neither Calvin Ridley nor Christian Kirk. And ultimately, to me, what this comes down to is, what do you think of Calvin Ridley? Because to me, that's the important part. The last full season we saw out of Calvin Ridley, he had a 25.8% target share, and he had over 40% of the air yards. He was first in the NFL in weighted opportunities. That was an actual alpha wide receiver. He was the wide receiver 4 overall in that season, over 18 points per game. Christian Kirk's never threatened that. Ryan
passed a lot of footballs that year.
Oh, for sure he did.
But I think Trevor
was going to pass a lot of
footballs this year.
Footballs, yeah. Right. And then, of course, he came back the next year, and I don't know, I guess you can kind of make what you want out of his 5 games in 2021. You can either say it was incredible that he had a 30% target share and over 40% of the air yards and was first in the entire NFL in expected fantasy points per game, or you can say it was terrible that he had 5.7 yards per target, or you can say it was 5 games when he was extremely depressed and injured by his own account, and it was 5 games, so you can probably mostly ignore it. But at the very least, you can use it to say that he continued to earn a bunch of volume, at least, like he was doing in 2021, or 2020. More or less, the last time we saw Ridley on the field, he was a top 5 wide receiver in terms of his usage, and he was able to do that over 1 season and a little bit of an underseason. Christian Kirk had his best season of his career, and he was the wide receiver 18 in points per game. He had 14.3 points per game. Now, he will be in the exact same offense, the same quarterback, the same coach, and the only difference is that one of the wide receivers he's running a route against every play used to be Marvin Jones, and now it's Calvin Ridley. And whatever you think of Calvin Ridley, I can almost promise you he's better than Marvin Jones, or at least this version of Marvin Jones. So I just don't really see how you can be super excited about Christian Kirk. It's really hard to construct a result that isn't he just runs extremely hot on touchdowns or something, in which he is better than he was last year. And so therefore the relevant question to me is, what do you want to do with Calvin Ridley? And I guess that's kind of up to you. Like, I don't know. We're talking about making a guess on, is this guy good in a situation that we've basically never seen before? Like, we don't really have a sample of players returning from 1.5 year long gambling related absences. So couldn't tell you. Like, I can tell you this, though. If Calvin Ridley is just Calvin Ridley, then he's basically Stephon Diggs that you can draft in round 7. And if he's not Calvin Ridley, then maybe you just lit a round 7 pick on fire. But that's fine. To my exact tweet that I posted, somebody replied with, yeah, but who's more likely to leave the team by week 7? Which is like, first of all, just a stupid comment. But second of all, it's like, you probably shouldn't be making decisions at the wide receiver position based on who is more likely to fall below wide receiver 2 production, because wide receiver 2 production is pretty irrelevant. So you should probably be doing it based on who's more likely to have wide receiver 1 production. So I'm in on Ridley at cost for sure. And I don't know, like, I don't really care about Kirk at cost either way. He's fine. It's not great.
Yeah, this is kind of the same, not exactly the same thing, but it's a similar thing where Calvin Ridley got suspended, and then we went and bought him low a whole bunch of places, and now we're just riding the wave on the way back up. And if I can get use Calvin Ridley to get into a player I really like, I'm going to do it. And if I can't, then I'm just going to hold Ridley and hope for the best. And I don't think that Calvin Ridley may not be a top 5 wide receiver this year, but I don't think he's going to be like a non-starting NFL wide receiver. And I don't think that his skills are going to be completely gone after sitting out a year and a half due to suspension. So I'm fine with buying Calvin Ridley. I'm fine holding Christian Kirk. I'm probably not going to in a whole lot of places, but I think it's fine. I think he's priced tremendously outrageous or anything. That's the price you pay for a wide receiver too. It's fine. The other thing with Calvin Ridley though is that he's pretty old. I think he's 28
he's older
or 29 right now.
Yeah, he'll be turning 29 this year.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's fine. He's probably going to be a wide receiver too. And
yeah, I mean, you really need with Ridley, this is the thing with Ridley to pay off. It's really what it comes down to is how optimistic are you on him being what he was the last time we saw him? Because if he's what he was the last time we saw him and he plays with Lawrence, then like I said, it's probably you're getting Stephon Diggs level production and you're getting a pretty massive discount on it. And it doesn't really matter how old he is because you're getting wide receiver 1 level difference making production. If he's just a wide receiver 2, he's probably overpriced. And if he can't play football anymore, then I guess he's terrible. I think that's probably pretty unlikely. So it really just kind of comes down to how high of a chance do you think he is at that elite ceiling? But I just look around at the board of players where he goes, and it's really him and Hopkins to me that have a viable case for being actually elite producers at that range of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few other guys that have some pretty high ceilings if things break right. I think Chris Godwin and Terry McLaurin are going in that range.
See, I think they have theoretical ceilings in the sense that if the world changed around them, they have the requisite talent. But Chris Godwin is not going to be a wide receiver 1 with Baker Mayfield. Sorry.
What?
I mean, look, I guess I shouldn't. I mean, I'm probably more into McLaurin just from the standpoint of I think Sam Howell's bad, but I don't know he's bad. I know Baker's bad.
Yeah, I think and Brandon Ayuk's going right around there too. And I'm I don't think that Brandon Ayuk is going to dominate this year, but crazy things happen. He might get traded. There's other guys that have ceiling, Chris Godwin might get traded. There's other guys that have a range of outcomes that's unpredictable, but I think that Calvin Ridley has a range of outcomes that doesn't require unpredictable. He just has to not have, diminished his skills in his year off, which he wasn't hurt. So he's probably mentally healthier now than he was then, and potentially is the same that he was before he left. So I think he's a perfectly fine pick. And I think that you would really be foolish to pick Christian Kirk over him. And the other thing too is Calvin Ridley has a higher ceiling, and Calvin Ridley, if he hits that ceiling, has a much higher value range as well. Because Christian Kirk isn't going to go up if he just does the same thing he did this year. This is him.
Well, and the other nice thing about Ridley is it's going to happen. It's going to happen fast, and I mean, there's almost 2 outs to Ridley because. Okay, what did we just talk about with Chigakonkwo, right? It's sometimes – actually, what we talked about before the show even started was we're talking about Baker Mayfield. And we were do you think Baker Mayfield was ever actually good, or did he just run hot for long enough that we thought he was probably good? And I don't know the answer to that. But it's undeniably true that things can seem true while not being true in small samples, right? It seems like Chigakonkwo is one of the most efficient tight ends in the league based on that small sample.
Based on literally 30 receptions.
Right. It may not in fact be true. Calvin Ridley, everybody mostly agrees on what the deal is with Calvin Ridley, right? It's he used to be an elite wide receiver 1. He missed a year and a half. We have no idea what he is now. If he comes out week 1 and he has 7 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown, people will be oh, we got our answer. He's an elite wide receiver 1. And maybe he even isn't, right? Maybe he actually is just a wide receiver 2 who happened to get hot. If Christian Kirk comes out and has Christian Kirk last year, right? He had to have a lot of games in a row for people to really adjust their priors on Christian Kirk. because, and for like a reasonable enough reason. Like if a player who has been one thing for a long period of time then looks like they're another thing, people are like, okay, are they actually another thing, or are they just getting hot? Right? Think about, yeah, exactly. Right. But with Calvin Ridley, like it's going to be instant. Like he has one really great week early season. I think people jump out to best case scenario immediately, because it'd be a lot more plausible. And at that point, like you don't even have to hold. You can just immediately sell if you want to, right? And I mean, and frankly, I would probably be on the side of saying he probably is just back to what he was, but then it doesn't even matter, right? Then it doesn't even matter. Then you're at least getting the reality that he is just exactly what he is. Mm-hmm. And you probably get a decent runway off the top too, right? Like it's pretty, let's say he's like, I don't know, 4 catches or 50 yards. We're going to be like, well, he needs a little bit of time to get back to his team. Like, I don't know. I just think you're going to get a little bit of forgiveness in the market out of Ridley, but you're also going to get just immediate smash by. He's back if he crashes. That's all I have for the regularly schedule. Oh,
honestly, one other thing, I don't even know if you have to wait for week 1. Like, I think if we get into training camp and he's making all kinds of plays, like I think people are going to be like, oh, he's back. And you can sell at that point for a tidy profit. And if we get into training camp and Christian Kirk is making all kinds of plays, nobody's going to care.
Right. It's very true. It's very, very true. Okay. That's the end of our regularly scheduled program. Do you have anything else to add? It's 11 p.m. Pacific time, so I'm hoping you don't.
I have no further comments.
All right. Where can people find you, Drew?
You can find me on Twitter at DFBcounter. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/bulletproofff. And then we have the website, which is freaking amazing, which is bulletproofff.com. So you should go on there and check it out. There's some free stuff like the ADP, which is like to die for.
Incredible. You can find me in the Bulletproof Discord. You can find me on Twitter at Jacob Sanderson. And of course, you can find me Full Tilt Podcast Network. And most of all, you can find me on Substack, jacobsanderson.substack.com, thinking about thinking. We've mostly wrapped our Dynasty heavy portion of the Substack with all of the Ricky content, but we are pivoting to Best Ball Summer. So I put up my introductory Best Ball article out this past week. We'll have more coming quite shortly. Excited for all that. And I will also say that I will have some Dynasty rankings for the people who are still fully in the throes of Dynasty season. We'll have some Dynasty rankings up there in collaboration with a couple of really cool folks that you'll hear about quite soon. So yeah, keep tuned to that, and make sure, of course, stay tuned to Sweatin Bullets. We'll be back shortly enough to keep you abreast of all of the twists and turns in the Dynasty market all summer long. Have a lovely evening, morning, afternoon, whenever it is you're listening to this fine show.